The champagne in my glass was warm, but the blood running through my veins had turned to ice. I stood in the shadows of the grand ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton, clutching the stem of the flute so hard I thought the crystal might snap. The room smelled of expensive perfume, aged scotch, and the distinct, metallic scent of unbridled greed. This was the night. The launch of the Aries LifeLink system. My life's work. My baby. On the raised stage, bathed in a spotlight that cost more than my first car, stood my father, Richard. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him a little too tightly around the waist, his face flushed with the intoxication of attention. Beside him was my brother, Kyle. Kyle, who was currently swaying slightly, a glassy look in his eyes that told me he'd already visited the open bar, or the bathroom stall, a few too many times tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard's voice boomed through the surround sound system, smooth as oil. Tonight isn't just about technology. It's about legacy. It's about genius. He paused for dramatic effect. The crowd of investors, tech moguls, and Wall Street sharks leaned in. I present to you the architect of the future, Richard bellowed, raising a hand. The soul mind behind the Aries system, my son, Kyle. The applause was thunderous. It washed over me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. Kyle. Kyle couldn't code "Hello World" in Python without crashing a server. Kyle, who had spent the last 6 months working from home, which was code for gambling away his salary on online poker and sleeping off hangovers. I stepped forward. I didn't mean to, but my legs moved on their own. I needed to be seen. I needed Richard to acknowledge that I existed. That I was the one who pulled the all-nighters. That I was the chief engineer. As the applause died down, Richard stepped off the podium and made his way through the VIP section. He saw me. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes, they went cold. Dead cold. He motioned for me to come closer. I walked over, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Dad, I started, my voice trembling. You said we were doing this together. You said the equity split was going to be announced tonight. Richard leaned in close. To the cameras, it looked like a father sharing a tender moment with his daughter. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder, squeezing just hard enough to hurt. Don't make a scene, Natalie, he whispered. His breath smelled of scotch and peppermint. You're ruining the aesthetic. The aesthetic. I choked out. I wrote the Colonel, Dad. I designed the safety protocols. Kyle doesn't even know the password to the mainframe. Kyle is the face, Richard hissed, his voice dropping an octave, becoming a jagged blade. Investors want a visionary young man. They don't want a spinster mechanic in a fierce pantsuit. We're giving the equity to Kyle. All of it. I stared at him. The noise of the party faded into a dull roar. What about my share? The 30% you promised. My contract. There is no contract, Natalie. We never signed it, remember? I told you to trust family. He chuckled, a low, wet sound. You're just the mechanic. Mechanics get an hourly wage. They don't get equity. He leaned closer, his lips brushing my ear. And frankly, we don't need a mechanic anymore. The system is perfect. So smile, turn around, and get out. You're fired. If you make a scene, I'll bury you. You won't even get a severance package. I looked at my mother, Barbara. She was standing a few feet away, holding a glass of wine, laughing at something a senator's wife was saying. She caught my eye. She saw the devastation on my face. She saw Richard gripping my shoulder. She didn't step in. She didn't look concerned. She just raised her glass in a tiny, mocking toast and turned her back. That was the moment. That was the moment something inside me didn't just break, it incinerated. I looked at Richard. I looked at Kyle, who was now high-fiving the lead investor, spilling his drink on the floor. I looked at the $1.2 billion valuation scrolling on the massive LED screens behind them. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my drink in his face. I didn't cry. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out my security badge. The badge that gave me Level 5 administrator access. The badge that identified me as the Chief Safety Officer. I set it gently on the mahogany table next to Richard. It made a soft click. "Goodbye, Richard," I said. My voice was steady. Terrifyingly steady. "It's Mr. CEO to you," he sneered, turning back to the crowd, his fake smile plastering back onto his face instantly. I turned around and walked out. I walked past the investors who were toasting a fraud. I walked past the security guards who nodded at me, unaware that I was no longer their boss. I walked out into the cool night air of the valet stand. The valet brought my 10-year-old Honda Civic around. It sputtered as it idled next to a line of Bentleys and Ferraris. I got in, closed the door, and the silence of the car wrapped around me. My hands were shaking now. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. Richard thought he had won. He thought he had just cut loose a disgruntled employee. He thought he had just saved himself 30% of a billion-dollar company. He forgot one thing. He forgot that Ares wasn't just a machine. It was a Class 3 medical device. It required a licensed human supervisor to operate. And he had just fired the only person in the hemisphere with the biometric clearance to keep it running. I looked at the digital clock on my dashboard. It was 4:45 p.m. In 15 minutes, the automated server check would ping my phone. "Mechanics don't get equity," I whispered to the empty car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "Okay, Dad. Let's see how your statue stands without the pedestal." I didn't start the car immediately. I sat there, the engine cold, listening to the muffled bass of the celebration music thumping through the garage concrete. It sounded like a heartbeat. A dying heartbeat. My name is Natalie. I am 34 years old, and for the last decade, I haven't been a person. I've been a ghost. A fixer. A mechanic. Inside that building, they were toasting to the future. They were celebrating the Ares LifeLink, a robotic prosthetic system that could allow a surgeon in New York to operate on a patient in Tokyo with zero latency. A miracle of engineering. But they didn't know the cost. They didn't know that every single line of code, every safety protocol, and every FDA compliance log bore my digital fingerprint. My mind drifted back, pulled into the gravity of the past. 10 years ago. I was 24, fresh out of MIT with honors, drowning in student loans because my parents had spent my college fund on Kyle's gap year in Europe, a trip that ended with him getting arrested in Ibiza and Richard paying 5 figures to make it go away. "Come work for the family business," Barbara had told me, her voice dripping with that sickly sweet manipulation she perfected. "Help your brother. He has big ideas, Natalie. He just needs someone to handle the details." The details. That was me. I remembered the first office. A garage, essentially. Kyle was the CEO. I was the intern. My salary was minimum wage. Kyle's salary was 6 figures. He has to maintain an image for investors, Richard had argued when I found the payroll documents. "You don't need suits, Natalie. You're in the back room." I stayed because of Nana Rose. My grandmother, Richard's mother, was the only person in that bloodline who actually had a soul. Before she died, she grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman on her deathbed. "Natalie," she had rasped. "You have the gift. You have the mind. But your father, he has the hunger. And your brother has the weakness. They will try to eat you alive." She reached under her pillow and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. It was black, battered, and smelled of lavender and old paper. This is a ledger, she whispered. My father taught me this. Men like Richard, they rely on handshake deals and forgotten promises. You write everything down. Every date. Every number. Every lie. You keep the receipts, child. Because one day, the bill will come due. I took that advice to heart. For 10 years, I kept the black ledger. I remembered the incident 3 years ago. The clinical trial. Kyle had pushed for an early demo of the prototype arm. He wanted to impress a venture capital firm from Silicon Valley. I told him the latency stabilizers weren't ready. I told him the haptic feedback loop had a 0.5-second delay that could be fatal in surgery. You worry too much, Kyle had slurred, waving a half-empty beer bottle at me in the lab. Just override the safety limits. Make it look fast. I can't do that, Kyle. It's illegal. It's dangerous. Do it, or you're out. Richard had barked, stepping into the room. We need this funding. I didn't override the limits. I rewrote the entire stabilization algorithm in 48 hours straight, fueled by caffeine and panic, just to make it safe enough for the demo. During the demo, the arm jittered. Just once. The scalpel moved 3 millimeters to the left. It missed the synthetic artery by a hair's breadth. The investors didn't notice. They clapped. They cheered. They signed a check for $5 million. But back in the office, Richard cornered me. He threw a stack of papers on my desk. What is this? I asked. An NDA. And an admission of fault, Richard said coldly. The jitter. We told the investors it was a calibration error caused by a junior engineer. You. Me? I stood up, outraged. I saved the demo. Kyle wanted to bypass the safeties. Sign it, Natalie, my mother said from the doorway, her arms crossed. Don't be selfish. If we admit it was a hardware issue, the valuation drops. If it's human error, we can just say we retrained you. It protects the stock. Protects the stock. I felt tears stinging my eyes. What about my reputation? My license? We are your reputation. Richard roared, slamming his hand on the desk. Without us, you're nothing. You sign that paper, or I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. I know people, Natalie. I can ruin you. I signed it. I signed it because I was scared. I signed it because I thought if I took the bullet one more time, they would finally love me. They would finally see my loyalty. I looked at my hands now, gripping the steering wheel of my Civic. These were the hands that wrote the code. These were the hands that secured the safety of thousands of patients. And these were the hands that held the only key to the kingdom. My phone buzzed in my lap. The screen lit up with a notification I had received every single day for 3,650 days. It was time. The vibration against my thigh was a feeling I knew better than my own heartbeat. 5 p.m. The daily automated prompt from the Ares central server. I pulled the phone out. The screen glowed with a simple white notification box in the dim light of the parking garage. Biometric handshake required Level 5 Administrator, N. Vance authorized daily operations. For 10 years, I had pressed the green accept button without thinking. I pressed it on Christmas morning while my family opened gifts without me because I was on call. I pressed it during my best friend's wedding reception, hiding in the bathroom stall so Richard wouldn't scream at me for a delay. I pressed it while I had the flu, while I was on dates that went nowhere because I was married to my job, and while I was burying Nana Rose. That button was the leash that kept the billion-dollar dog walking in a straight line. And Richard had just cut the leash. The cursor blinked. The green accept button pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat asking to be sustained. Below it, the red decline button sat still, dark and ominous. My thumb hovered over the screen. Suddenly, a barrage of text messages flooded the top of my display, momentarily obscuring the prompt. Ping. Sender, Kyle, the golden boy, photo attachment, a selfie of Kyle holding a magnum of Dom Perignon, Richard laughing in the background, and my mother eating caviar. Text, look at us. 1.2 billion, baby. Don't wait up, loser. We're taking the jet to Aspen tonight. Maybe you can get a job at Geek Squad. LOL. Ping. Sender, mom text, Natalie, stop sulking. It's unbecoming. We'll send you a check for $5,000 next week to help with your rent. Consider it a bonus. Don't contact Dad right now, he's very busy with important people. Ping. Sender, Richard text, I noticed you took the company laptop. Bring it back by Monday, or I'm filing a theft report. And don't think about claiming unemployment. You were fired for cause. Insubordination. Insubordination. Something inside my chest, something that had been tight and painful for years, suddenly snapped. But it wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet. It was the sound of a heavy chain finally rusting through and falling to the floor. They didn't just fire me. They erased me. Richard was right about one thing. He had built a kingdom. But he forgot that a kingdom built on technology needs a ruler who speaks the language. He had exiled the queen, but he left the keys in her pocket. I looked at the text from Mom. $5,000. A check. Like I was a charity case. I thought about the salary disparity. Kyle made $450,000 a year plus bonuses. I made $72,000. We're a startup, sweetie, Mom always said. We all have to sacrifice. I sacrificed. I sacrificed my 20s. I sacrificed my love life. I sacrificed my mental health. And for what? To be threatened with a theft report for a laptop I paid for with my own money. I looked at the prompt again. Authorize daily operations. If I pressed accept, the Aries mark for robotic arm, currently performing a live demonstration for the global market, would continue its delicate movements. The investors would cheer. The stock would soar. Kyle would go to Aspen. If I didn't. Well, Richard said I was just a mechanic. Mechanics don't get equity, I said aloud. My voice sounded strange in the small car. Stronger. Darker. And fired employees don't authorize federal safety protocols. This wasn't revenge. That's what I told myself. This was malicious compliance. This was following the rules to the letter. The FDA regulations for Class 3 autonomous surgical devices are clear. Section 21 CFR Part 11. A licensed human supervisor must biometrically authenticate the system's operational integrity every 24 hours. If the supervisor is absent, incapacitated, or in this case, terminated, the system must default to failsafe mode. It's not a bug. It's a law. My thumb moved. It didn't shake. It didn't hesitate. I bypassed the green button. I pressed decline. A new message flashed on the screen immediately. It was red. Authorization denied, supervisor absent, initiating emergency lockdown protocol, code 000. I put the phone down on the passenger seat. I didn't turn it off. I wanted them to call. I reached into my bag and pulled out my tablet. I propped it up on the steering wheel and opened the live stream of the gala. On the screen, Richard was clinking his glass against the lead investor's flute. He looked like a king. Behind him, on the demonstration stage, the Aries mark for robot arm was performing a delicate piano sonata. Its titanium fingers were moving with fluid grace, playing Chopin. It was a masterpiece of engineering. My masterpiece. Zero equity, I whispered. Then, it happened. On the tablet screen, the piano music stopped instantly. The Ares arm didn't just slow down. It slammed to a halt. It froze mid-strike, its fingers rigid, locked in a protective rigor mortis. The sudden silence in the ballroom was louder than the applause had been. Richard frowned, tapping his glass again, thinking it was a pause in the program. He turned to the prototype and waved his hand, expecting the motion sensors to pick him up. The arm stayed dead. Then came the sound. Even through the tablet speakers it was piercing. Beep. 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 A low, rhythmic pulse began to blare from the display console. It was the FDA-mandated alarm for an unsupervised device. The investors stopped drinking. They exchanged confused glances. Kyle rushed over to the console, his face pale. I watched him furiously tapping the screen, trying to bypass the lock. He looked like a child trying to fly a spaceship by banging on the dashboard. A large red banner scrolled across the massive presentation screen behind them, replacing the Ares logo. It was crisp, clear, and impossible to ignore. System locked down. Unauthorized operation. Licensed supervisor missing. All units disabled. Richard's smile vanished. He spun around, his eyes scanning the room, scanning the crowd, looking for the one person he had just thrown out like trash. He was looking for the mechanic. I took a sip of the lukewarm water bottle in my cup holder. The show was just beginning. The silence in my car was shattered by the ringtone I had assigned to my father. A jarring, repetitive siren. The name Richard flashed on the dashboard screen like a threat. I picked up. I didn't say hello. I didn't have to. Turn it back on. His voice was so loud it distorted the speaker. I could hear the chaos in the background. Investors shouting, chairs scraping, the relentless beep 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 of the FDA alarm. Turn it back on right now, Natalie. I know you did this. I know you rigged it. I leaned back in my seat, watching the live stream on my tablet. On screen, Kyle was sweating through his expensive suit, frantically mashing buttons on a console that was completely dead. He looked terrified. I didn't rig anything, Richard, I said, my voice calm, almost bored. It felt good. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of him. I told you, I'm just the mechanic. And since I don't work there anymore, I can't authorize the safety protocols. Don't give me that technical garbage, he screamed. You sabotaged the fleet. You planted a virus. I have the lead investor here. Mr. Holloway is watching this. I will sue you for everything you have. I will bury you so deep you'll never work in this industry again. It's not a virus, I corrected him, keeping my tone light. It's a feature. Specifically, it's the 24-hour supervisor mandate required for Class 3 medical devices. Without a licensed administrator to biometrically sign the logs, the system defaults to safe mode to prevent patient injury. It's not sabotage. Dad, it's the law. I don't care about the law, he roared. I have $1 billion deal on the table. Fix it. I can't, I said. I'm not an employee. Accessing the system now would be a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. You wouldn't want me to break the law, would you? You ungrateful little witch. I hung up. I watched the screen. Richard was staring at his phone in disbelief. He looked up at the crowd. He tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace. Ladies and gentlemen, he stammered into the microphone, which was giving frantic feedback. A minor technical glitch. A safety test. Yes. We are demonstrating that absolute safety of the shutdown mechanism. Mr. Holloway, the lead investor, wasn't buying it. He was a silver-haired man with eyes like flint. He walked up to the frozen robot arm. He looked at the red warning banner on the screen, supervisor missing. He turned to Richard. I couldn't hear what he said over the chaos of the stream, but I saw Richard flinch. My phone rang again. This time it was Kyle. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text from Kyle, "You are dead. Dad called the FBI. They are coming for you." I laughed. A dry, humorless laugh. They called the FBI. Perfect. They were digging their own grave, and they were handing me the shovel. I switched apps on my tablet. I opened the remote server logs. Because I was the system architect, I had designed the backend to mirror all activity to a secure cloud server, my personal black box recorder. It was meant to debug crashes, but now, it was recording a crime scene. The logs showed Kyle's frantic attempts to bypass the lock. Attempt 1, user Kyle V password incorrect. Attempt 2, user Kyle V password incorrect. Attempt 3, user admin_override access denied. Then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Command executed /force_restart, safety_protocols_OFF. Kyle was trying to force a hard reboot without safety limits. If he succeeded, the arm would come back online, but without the latency stabilizers. If that happened during a surgery, it would kill someone. He was willing to risk lives just to save face at a party. I couldn't let that happen. Not because of them, but because I took an oath. I initiated a command from my phone, lockdown level 2, encryption shield. On the live stream, the screens behind Richard went black. Then, a single image appeared. A giant, pixelated padlock. The crowd gasped. Richard grabbed the microphone again. Security. Get security. We are under cyber attack. He was spinning a narrative. He was turning me into a terrorist. I watched as security guards rushed the stage, tackling nobody. There was nobody there to tackle. The attacker was sitting in a Honda Civic 5 miles away, drinking lukewarm water. I felt a strange sense of detachment. This was the company I had built. These were the machines I had loved. And now, I was watching them die. But they weren't just machines. They were leverage. My phone rang a third time. Mom, I stared at the screen. Barbara. The enabler. The woman who watched me get fired and raised a glass. I shouldn't answer. I knew I shouldn't. But I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the desperation. I needed to know they were hurting as much as I was. I slid the bar to answer. Natalie. Her voice was breathless, high-pitched. She was crying. Or pretending to cry. Hello, Barbara. Oh, thank God, she sobbed. Natalie, please. Your father is having chest pains. Kyle is throwing up in the bathroom. This is a nightmare. How could you do this to us? How could you be so cruel? Cruel? I asked. You watched them fire me. You laughed. I was nervous. I didn't know what to do. The classic pivot. We're family, Natalie. Family forgives. Please. Just unlock it. For me? If you love me, you'll fix this. I loved you for 34 years, Mom, I said softly. And it got me fired in a ballroom. We'll give you the money, she shrieked, the mask slipping. We'll give you a raise. We'll give you 5%. Mechanics don't get equity, Mom. Stop saying that. Just give us the password. There is no password. It requires my fingerprint. And my fingerprint is currently attached to my hand, which is driving away. Where are you going? Home, I lied. I suggest you tell Dad to stop trying to force a restart. If he burns out the servos, the warranty is void. He called the police, Natalie, she whispered, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. He told them you're holding the company hostage. He told them you demanded a ransom. They're going to arrest you. Let them come, I said. I have the receipts. I hung up. But as I put the phone down, a chill went through me. Richard was a powerful man. He played golf with judges. He donated to the police benevolent fund. If he spun the story right, if he claimed I was a hacker demanding ransom, they wouldn't just arrest me. They would raid me. They would seize my devices. I needed to secure the evidence. I put the car in gear and sped out of the parking lot. I wasn't going home. That was the first place they would look. I was going to the one place they would never think to find me. I drove to a 24-hour internet cafe in a strip mall on the edge of town. It was the kind of place with neon lights buzzing and teenagers playing League of Legends. It was anonymous. It was safe. I found a booth in the back, pulled out my laptop, and connected to their secure VPN. My hands were flying across the keyboard. I wasn't hacking. I was backing up. I accessed the Black Ledger. Nana Rose's physical notebook had been digitized years ago. It was now an encrypted folder on my private cloud drive, labeled simply, Recipes. I opened it. File, 2021-0 for -12_Kyle_gambling_debt.pdf file, 2022-09-08_Richard_bribe_senator.mp3 file, 2023-01-15_FDA_violation_report_suppressed.docs. It was all there. 10 years of cleaning up their messes. But I needed something specific. I needed the nuclear option. During the phone call, Mom had mentioned the family business. She loved to talk about how she sacrificed for the company too. I navigated to a folder from 5 years ago. Patent_assignments. When the core technology for the Aries link was invented, I was the sole inventor. My name was on the original filing. But Richard had told me that for tax purposes and trust structures, the patent needed to be held by the holding company. He had presented me with a transfer document. I remembered signing it. But then I opened the scanned copy of the filed document. I zoomed in on the signature page. Assignor, Natalie Vance. Assignee, Aries Holdings LLC, sole member, Kyle Vance. Wait. I stared at the signature. It said Natalie Vance. But the loop on the end was too wide. The slant was wrong. It looked shaky. It wasn't my signature. I pulled up a document I knew my mother had signed, a birthday card she sent me 3 years ago. I compared the handwriting. The A's match. The aggressive cross on the T. Barbara. My mother hadn't just watched me get fired. 5 years ago, she had forged my signature to transfer my intellectual property directly to a shell company owned by Kyle. They didn't just steal my job. They stole my mind. They stole my invention. We sold our company, she had said in my nightmare. No. They sold my company. A wave of nausea hit me. I had to run to the cafe bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at myself in the dirty mirror. My eyes were red. My makeup was smudged. Stop it, I told my reflection. Stop crying. Cry later. Plan now. I went back to the booth. My phone buzzed again. Sender, Kyle text, you think you're smart. I know about the back door. I'm wiping the servers. Good luck proving anything without logs. Panic spiked in my chest. If Kyle wiped the servers physically at the office, he could delete the evidence of his own negligence and frame it as a data loss caused by my virus. He was stupid, but he was destructive. I checked the remote connection. The connection was sluggish. He was doing it. He was running a magnetic wipe on the local drives. I had to stop him. I had to get the physical hard drives from the server room before he fried them. The cloud backup was good, but in court, physical hardware is king. My phone rang. It was Richard again. I hesitated. Why was he calling if he had already called the FBI? I answered. Natalie, his voice was surprisingly calm. Too calm. It was the voice he used when he was closing a deal. Let's stop this nonsense. I've sent the police away. You did? I asked, skeptical. Yes. Look, we're all emotional. It's a big night. I shouldn't have fired you publicly. That was harsh. I apologize. An apology? From Richard? That was more suspicious than a Nigerian prince email. What do you want, Richard? I want to make it right. Come to the office. Just you and me and Kyle. We'll sit down. We'll rewrite the equity agreement. 20%. Reinstatement of your title. And a public apology. 20%. 25, he countered quickly. But you have to come now. The investors are waiting. I need you to unlock the system physically. The remote link is unstable. Unstable because Kyle was trying to wipe it. I don't know, Dad. Natalie, please. Don't throw away $1 billion. Don't throw away your family. Just come in. Sign the papers. Unlock the arm. And we can all go home rich. It was a trap. Every alarm bell in my head was ringing. But if I didn't go, Kyle would finish wiping the drives. I would lose the evidence of the forgery and the safety violations. I would be left with nothing but a story, and they had the best lawyers money could buy. I needed those drives. Okay, I said. I'm coming in. Good girl, Richard said. The relief in his voice was palpable. Come to the main conference room. We're waiting. I hung up. I wasn't going to the main conference room. Not yet. I texted Sarah, my old assistant. Sarah was the only person in that building who treated me like a human. She was 22, sharp and terrified of Richard. Me, Sarah, are you in the building? Sarah, yes. OMG Nat, it's crazy here. FBI is everywhere. My heart stopped. Me, FBI. Dad said he sent them away. Sarah, he's lying. They are in the conference room hiding in the back. They have a warrant. He told them you're a cyber terrorist. Do not come here. I stared at the screen. He didn't want to negotiate. He wanted to lure me in so the FBI could arrest me on sight, probably with my hand on a keyboard, caught in the act. Okay, Dad, I whispered, a cold smile touching my lips. You want a show? Let's give you a show. I opened my laptop again. I activated a program I had written years ago for remote diagnostics. It was a mirroring protocol. It would broadcast audio and video from the boardroom's AV system directly to my private cloud. Then, I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, unassuming USB drive. I wasn't just going to get the drives. I was going to get the confession. I paid for my cafe time with cash. I pulled my hoodie up over my head. I was going back into the lion's den. But this time, the lion didn't know the tamer was bringing a whip. The Ares MedTech building was a glass and steel monolith in downtown Seattle. At night, it looked like a spaceship ready to launch. I parked my Civic 3 blocks away, in an alley behind a dumpster. I didn't want the valet to see me. I didn't want security to see the car. I walked the rest of the way, sticking to the shadows. The rain had started to fall, a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked through my hoodie. It felt appropriate. I reached the service entrance around the back. This was where the cafeteria deliveries came in. It was also where I used to sneak out to cry in my car during lunch breaks. I swiped my badge. Beep beep. Access denied. Right. They deactivated it. I looked up at the camera. It was a dummy camera. I knew that because Kyle had cut the budget for rear security to buy a new espresso machine for his office. I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah. Open the loading dock door. Now. Please. 3 agonizing minutes passed. I was about to give up when the heavy steel door clicked and groaned open. Sarah stood there, looking pale and terrified. She was wearing her gala dress, but her mascara was running. You're crazy, she hissed, pulling me inside. They have agents in the lobby. They have agents in the elevator banks. Where are Richard and Kyle? I asked, shaking off the rain. Penthouse boardroom. With the lead agent and Mr. Holloway. Mr. Holloway is still there. This was good. Holloway was a witness. Yeah, he's furious. He says he's not leaving until the system works. Sarah grabbed my arm. Nat, seriously. If you go up there, they will cuff you. I heard Richard telling the agents that you threatened to delete the patient database if they didn't pay you $10 million. $10 million. I scoffed. He always undervalues me. He's framing you, Nat. He planted a file on your work computer. I saw him and Kyle doing it before the FBI got here. They named it ransom_demand.txt. My blood boiled. They were planting evidence. Sarah, I said, looking her in the eye. I need you to do one thing for me. Go to the server room. Pull the physical hard drives from rack 3. The backup drives. Hide them in your purse. Can you do that? Rack 3. The compliance logs. Yes. If I get arrested, those drives are my only ticket out. Get them and take them home. Do not give them to anyone but me or a lawyer. Sarah swallowed hard. She was shaking. But then she nodded. For all the times you covered for me when I was late. I got you. She ran toward the server room. I turned toward the freight elevator. The freight elevator didn't require a key card for the penthouse. It was used by the catering staff. Another security flaw I had pointed out to Richard a year ago. He had ignored it. Who's going to rob us? The caterers, he had laughed. No, Dad. The daughter you betrayed. I rode the elevator up. The hum of the machinery was the only sound. I closed my eyes and centered myself. I tapped the app on my phone. Audio recording, on sync to cloud. The doors opened on the penthouse floor. The hallway was empty. The gala was downstairs in the ballroom, but the real party was in the boardroom at the end of the hall. The double glass doors were frosted, but I could see shadows moving inside. I walked softly down the carpeted hall. I could hear Richard's voice. It was loud, projecting confidence. Unstable individual. We tried to get her help. Psychiatric help. But she refused. She became obsessed with the code. She thinks she owns it. And the virus? A deep voice asked. The FBI agent. A logic bomb, Kyle chimed in. He sounded drunk. She said it to trigger if we ever fired her. It's vindictive. We just want our company back, Barbara's voice. We just want to save the patients. Save the patients. The hypocrisy was suffocating. I stood outside the door. My hand hovered over the handle. This was it. If I walked in there, I was walking into handcuffs. I knew that. But if I didn't walk in, the lie would become the truth. I took a deep breath. I remembered Nana Rose. Keep the receipts. I pushed the doors open. The heavy glass doors swung open with a whoosh. The room went silent. It was a tableau of power and corruption. Richard sat at the head of the long marble table, his tie loosened, looking like a weary general. Kyle was leaning against the window, nursing a tumbler of scotch. Barbara was sitting next to Richard, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Across from them sat Mr. Halloway, looking like a statue of judgment. And standing between them were 4 men in navy blue windbreakers with yellow letters on the back, FBI. Richard looked up. For a split second, genuine shock crossed his face. He hadn't expected me to actually show up. He expected me to run so he could hunt me. But then, the mask slid back into place. He stood up, pointing a shaking finger at me. "There she is," he shouted. "That's her. The hacker. Grab her before she wipes the system." The lead agent, a tall man with a buzz cut and a face carved out of granite, turned to me. His hand went to his belt, not to a gun, but to a pair of cuffs. "Natalie Vance," he barked. "Yes," I said, raising my hands. "I'm Natalie Vance. And I'm not hacking anything. I'm here to fix the mess my father created." "Don't listen to her," Kyle slurred, pushing off the wall. "She's crazy. She demanded 50%. She's holding us hostage." The agents moved fast. 2 of them flanked me. One grabbed my wrist, spinning me around. "You are under arrest for violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, extortion, and corporate espionage," the lead agent recited. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked around my wrists. The sound echoed in the silent room. Click. Click. It was the same sound my badge made when I put it on the table. I didn't resist. I stood there, physically restrained, while the people I had served for a decade watched. I looked at my mother. "Mom?" Barbara looked at me. Then she looked at the handcuffs. And then she looked away. She turned her head and stared at the abstract painting on the wall, refusing to witness the monster they had created. That hurt more than the metal biting into my skin. "Take her devices," Richard ordered. "She has the codes on her phone." An agent reached into my pocket and took my phone and my laptop bag. "Be careful with that," I said calmly. "It's recording." Richard froze. "What?" "My phone," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "It's streaming audio to a remote server. Everything you've said. Everything Kyle said about the logic bomb. It's all being saved." Richard's face went pale. He looked at the agent. "Destroy that phone. It's a triggering device." "We don't destroy evidence, Mr. Vance," the lead agent said, bagging the phone. He looked at Richard with a sudden flicker of suspicion. "Why would a CEO want evidence destroyed?" "She rigged the arm to kill people," Kyle shouted, trying to regain control of the narrative. "She's a psycho." Mr. Halloway stood up. He walked over to me. He looked at me, then at Richard. "Is it true?" Halloway asked me. "Did you put patients at risk for money?" "No," I said. "I initiated a safety lockdown to protect patients from him." I nodded at Kyle. "Ask them about the latency stabilizers, Mr. Halloway. Ask them why they wanted to run a Class 3 device without a supervisor." "She's lying," Richard screamed, slamming his fist on the table. "Get her out of here. I want her in a cell." "Let's go," the agent said, pushing me toward the door. As they marched me out, Kyle leaned in close. So close I could smell the expensive scotch and the cheap fear on his breath. "I told you, sis," he whispered, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "Dad's always one step ahead. Enjoy prison. I'll send you a postcard from Aspen." I looked at him. I didn't look angry anymore. I looked at him with pity. "You didn't check the error code, did you, Kyle?" I whispered back. "What?" "The screen. You didn't read the code. The agent shoved me forward. We walked out of the room, leaving Kyle standing there confused. They took me down the hall to a smaller conference room they had commandeered as a temporary holding area. They sat me down in a chair. The lead agent, whose name tag read Miller, sat across from me. "Look, Ms. Vance," Miller said, his voice dropping the aggressive edge. "We have logs provided by your father showing a virus upload at 4:55 p.m. We have a text file demanding ransom. It looks bad. If you give us the unlock code now, maybe the DA goes easy on you." I took a deep breath. "Agent Miller," I said. "I want you to bring in your technical expert. Not you. The guy who actually knows how to read Linux kernel logs." Miller frowned. "Agent Chen is analyzing your laptop right now." "Good. Bring him in. And bring in my father. And bring in Mr. Holloway. You're in no position to make demands." "I'm not making demands," I said. "I'm trying to save you from making a false arrest lawsuit that will end your career. Because in about 5 minutes, Agent Chen is going to find out that the virus isn't a virus." Miller stared at me. He saw something in my eyes. It wasn't the panic of a criminal. It was the certainty of an engineer. He stood up and tapped his earpiece. "Chen, bring the laptop in here." "Yeah. And tell Mr. Vance to come in. We have a confession." I smiled. "Oh, you're going to get a confession, Agent Miller." "Just not from me." 5 minutes later, the small room was crowded. Richard and Kyle stood by the door, looking triumphant. Barbara hovered behind them. Mr. Holloway sat in the corner, silent and observant. Agent Miller sat across from me. Beside him stood Agent Chen, a younger guy with glasses who was holding my laptop. Chen looked confused. He was typing furiously. "Okay," Richard said, crossing his arms. "Unlock it. And maybe I won't press charges for the emotional distress." "I can't unlock it, Richard," I said. "Why not?" "Because I didn't lock it." "Stop lying." Kyle snapped. We saw the red screen. I turned to Agent Chen. "Agent Chen, did you look at the source code of the lockdown command?" Chen looked up, adjusting his glasses. Yes. I'm looking at it now." "Read the file header," I instructed. "Read the author tag and the timestamp." Chen squinted at the screen. The room went deadly silent. "The file header says, Federal Compliance Protocol 21-11, Chen read slowly. Author, N. Vance. Date created, October 12, 2018. 2018. Miller asked. "That's 5 years ago." "Exactly," I said. "It's not a virus I wrote today. It's the core safety code I wrote 5 years ago when we got FDA approval." I leaned forward, the handcuffs clinking against the table. "Agent Miller, are you familiar with 21 CFR Part 11? Miller shook his head. "It's the Code of Federal Regulations for Electronic Records in Medical Devices," I explained. "It states that any system capable of remote surgery must have a dead man switch. If the licensed supervisor is terminated or incapacitated, the system must self-lock to prevent unauthorized use. Operating without it is a felony." I looked at Richard. His face was starting to lose its color. "When you fired me, Richard," I said, "you removed the supervisor. I didn't hack the system. I declined to break the law. The system detected that I was no longer authorized, so it locked itself down. That's not extortion. That's compliance. That's bullshit." Richard yelled. "She planted it." "Agent Chen," I said. "Check the ransom_demand.txt file that they claimed I planted." Chen typed. "Okay, I have it." "Check the metadata." When was it created? Chen paused. His eyes widened. He looked at Richard, then at Kyle. It was created 45 minutes ago, Chen said. From a terminal inside this building. Terminal ID, CEO_office_01. All eyes turned to Richard. That's impossible, Richard stammered. She hacked my computer. And the user login? Miller asked, his voice hardening. User login was K. Vance, Chen said quietly. Kyle dropped his glass of scotch. It shattered on the floor, splashing amber liquid onto his shoes. I didn't. Kyle stuttered. Dad told me to type it. He said we needed a reason for the FBI to come. Shut up, you idiot. Richard lunged at Kyle, slapping him across the face. Hey. Agent Miller leaped up, grabbing Richard and shoving him back against the wall. Sit down. Now. Mr. Holloway stood up slowly. He walked over to the table and looked at the screen Agent Chen was holding. So Holloway said, his voice low and dangerous. There is no virus. The system is just waiting for a supervisor. Yes, I said. And these two, Holloway pointed at Richard and Kyle, fired the only supervisor, tried to bypass the safety protocols to run a dangerous demo, and then forged a ransom note to frame her. It appears so, Agent Chen said. And I added, looking at my mother. There's one more thing. Agent Chen, check the folder marked patent_assignments. Open the signature analysis. Chen clicked. He projected the image onto the wall monitor. The two signatures, mine and the forgery, were side by side. That's not my signature, I said. My mother forged it to transfer the IP to Kyle. Barbara let out a small whimper and sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Agent Miller looked at me. Then he looked at Richard, who was sweating profusely, his tie askew. Miller reached into his pocket. But this time, he wasn't reaching for his notebook. He was reaching for his keys. He walked over to me. Ms. Vance, Miller said. I think we made a mistake. He unlocked my handcuffs. I rubbed my wrists. The metal was cold but the feeling of freedom was warm. I stood up. I looked at Richard. He looked small. He looked old. You said mechanics don't get equity, Dad, I said softly. Natalie, please, Richard begged, his voice cracking. We can fix this. We can make a deal. Actually, Agent Miller interrupted, turning to Richard. I think the only deal you're going to be making is a plea deal. Miller pulled his handcuffs out again. He walked toward Richard. Richard Vance, you are under arrest for filing a false police report, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. As the cuffs clicked onto Richard's wrists, I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I just picked up my badge from the evidence bag on the table. I'm keeping this, I said. The click of the handcuffs on Richard's wrists wasn't the end. In his mind, it was just a negotiation tactic. Richard didn't look like a man who had just been arrested for federal crimes. He looked like a CEO inconvenienced by a parking ticket. He stood up straight, adjusting his suit jacket with his cuffed hands, a look of profound annoyance on his face. Agent Miller, Richard said, his voice dropping to that patronizing baritone he used on junior executives. I understand you have a job to do. But let's be realistic. You're making a scene based on a misunderstanding of corporate structure. I have the police commissioner on speed dial. I have senators at my dinner table. Do you really want to be the guy who arrests the creator of Ares Lifelink? Miller didn't blink. He just tightened the cuffs. I'm not arresting the creator, Mr. Vance. I'm arresting the fraudster. Fraud. Richard scoffed, looking at Mr. Holloway for support. Arthur, tell him. Tell him about the valuation. Tell him about the pre-orders. We are revolutionizing medicine. Mr. Holloway remained seated, staring at the projection on the wall, the side-by-side signatures that proved the forgery. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd been eating poisoned food for 5 years. The valuation is based on your safety data, Richard, Holloway said quietly. And according to your daughter's logs, that data is fiction. It's not fiction. It's optimized. Richard shouted, his composure finally cracking. We had to smooth out the numbers. The market doesn't understand the engineering process. They panic over every little glitch. I did what I had to do to protect the stock. You mean protect your bonus, I said. I was standing by the window, rubbing my wrist where the cuffs had pinched. You overrode the thermal limits on the servos to make the arm move faster than the physics allowed. You risked melting the motors inside a patient's chest just so you could beat the competitor's speed benchmarks by 12%. And who fixed it? Richard spun on me, his eyes wild. You did. You always fixed it. That was your job. You were supposed to be the safety net. I was the safety net, I replied, my voice steady. Until you cut me down. Kyle, who had been cowering in the corner, suddenly stood up. The alcohol had given him a surge of liquid courage, or perhaps it was just sheer stupidity. It's not my fault. Kyle blurted out. I just signed where Dad told me to sign. I didn't know about the overrides. I'm just the visionary. The visionary? I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Kyle, you couldn't visualize a sandwich without a diagram. Shut up. Kyle lunged toward me, but an agent stepped in his path, pushing him back into his chair. I think we need to see the rest of it, Mr. Holloway said. He pointed at my laptop, which Agent Chen was still holding. Natalie, you said you had a black ledger. What else is in there? I looked at Richard. For the first time, I saw genuine fear. Not the fear of arrest, but the fear of exposure. The fear of being seen naked. Agent Chen, I said. Open the folder labeled financial_diversion. Sort by video files. Chen tapped the keys. A video file popped up on the projector. It was grainy footage from a security camera. It was dated 6 months ago. The timestamp showed 3 a.m. The location was the server room of Ares MedTech. In the video, Kyle was stumbling into the room, holding a bottle of champagne. He was with 2 women who were definitely not employees. He was laughing, leaning over the main server rack, the one that housed the patient database. Watch this, I whispered. On screen, Kyle spilled champagne directly into the cooling vents of the primary server. Sparks flew. The lights flickered. Kyle laughed, patted the server like a dog, and walked out. That outage cost us $4 million in data recovery, I said. Richard told the board it was a sophisticated cyber attack from China. He used the insurance payout to buy a vacation home in Turks and Caicos. The room was silent. And this one, I pointed to another file. Open Vegas_wire_transfer.pdf. Chen opened it. It was a bank record. A wire transfer of $2.5 million from the R&D budget to a shell corporation in Nevada called Golden Chip LLC. Golden Chip isn't a chip manufacturer, I explained. It's a holding company for the Bellagio high-limit lounge debts. Mr. Holloway stood up. His face was purple. You used my seed capital to pay off gambling debts. It was a loan. Kyle squeaked. I was going to win it back. I had a system. That's enough, Agent Miller said. We've seen enough. Agent Chen, secure that laptop as primary evidence. We're taking them in. Wait. Richard shouted. You can't take us out there. The gala. The press is downstairs. You can't walk us through the lobby in handcuffs. It will destroy the brand. The brand is already dead, Richard, I said. You killed it. Natalie, please, my mother spoke up. She hadn't moved from her chair until now. She looked small, frail, a shadow of the woman who had mocked me an hour ago. Don't let them do this. Think of our name. Think of the neighbors. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. We can fix the signatures. We can give you the money. Just make it stop. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had taught me to tie my shoes, who had bandaged my scraped knees, and who had forged my name to steal my life's work. I can't make it stop, Mom, I said. The bill has come due. You're a monster, she whispered. We gave you life. And then you sold it, I countered. Let's move, Miller ordered. The agents grabbed Richard and Kyle by the arms. They hauled them toward the door. Richard was still protesting, still trying to cite statutes he didn't understand, still trying to command the room. I am the CEO. Richard bellowed as they dragged him into the hallway. I demand a lawyer. I demand a new daughter. I stood there in the quiet of the conference room, as their voices faded down the hall. Mr. Holloway looked at me. I'm sorry, Natalie, he said. I should have looked closer. I should have seen the genius was you, not the boy in the suit. It doesn't matter now, I said, packing my bag. It's over. Not yet, Holloway said grimly. We still have to go downstairs. The world needs to know. I didn't want to go downstairs. I wanted to go home, curl up in a ball, and sleep for a week. But he was right. The lie had started on that stage. It had to end there. I followed Holloway out of the room. We walked to the elevator. The same elevator I had ridden up in silence. This time, as we descended, I wasn't the victim. I was the witness. And the wolves were already in the cage. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby level, but not the quiet back exit I had come in through. The FBI agents had taken Richard and Kyle to the main entrance, right through the spillover crowd of the gala. The noise hit us first. It wasn't the polite applause of earlier. It was a roar. A chaotic mix of shouting reporters, confused investors, and the flashing strobe lights of cameras. I stepped out behind Mr. Holloway. The scene in the lobby was something out of a Greek tragedy, if the Greeks wore tuxedos and carried smartphones. Richard and Kyle were being led toward the spinning glass doors. The press had somehow gotten wind of the raid, probably Sarah. Bless her. Mr. Vance. Mr. Vance. Is it true you're being charged with fraud? Kyle. Did you really gamble away the R&D fund? Is the Ares system safe? People are saying it's a death trap. Richard was trying to hide his face with his shoulder, a futile gesture given the handcuffs. Kyle was openly weeping, a snotty, pathetic mess that ruined the image of the boy genius forever. Barbara was trailing behind them, not in cuffs, but looking like she wished she were invisible. She held her purse over her face, stumbling in her heels. Mr. Holloway walked to the center of the room. He climbed onto a small riser that had been set up for press interviews. He tapped the microphone. The feedback screeched, silencing the room. The cameras turned from the spectacle of the arrest to the man with the checkbook. I stood in the shadows of a potted palm, watching. I didn't want the spotlight. I just wanted the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, Holloway's voice boomed. My name is Arthur Holloway. I am the lead investor of Ares MedTech. He paused, looking around the room. Tonight, we came here to celebrate a revolution in medicine. Instead, we have uncovered a revolution in deceit. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The Ares lifelink system is not ready, Holloway continued, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. The safety data was falsified. The clinical trials were compromised. And the true architect of this system, the the only person who actually cared about patient safety, was fired tonight because she refused to be complicit in a crime. He pointed toward the back of the room. He pointed at me. The spotlight swung. It blinded me for a second. I squinted, raising a hand. Natalie Vance, Holloway said. She is the engineer. She is the one who saved us from a catastrophe tonight. She locked the system down not to extort money, but to follow the law. The room turned to look at me. There was no applause this time. Just a stunned, heavy silence. The kind of silence that comes when a collective delusion is shattered. Effective immediately, Holloway announced. Holloway Capital is pulling all funding from Ares MedTech. We are freezing all assets pending a federal investigation. And I will be personally filing a civil suit against Richard and Kyle Vance for gross negligence and fraud. The chaos erupted again. Stockbrokers were screaming into their phones. Sell. Sell it all. It's going to zero. I watched the ticker on the wall. The news was already hitting the markets. Ares MedTech wasn't publicly traded yet, but the futures for the IPO were crashing. The projected value of $1.2 billion was evaporating like mist. Suddenly, a man in a surgical scrub cap ran into the lobby. He looked frantic. It was Dr. Aris, the head surgeon for the demo. The arm, he shouted. The arm is still locked. It's clamped onto the practice dummy. We can't remove it without damaging the hydraulics. We need the code. He spotted me. He ran over, grabbing my arm. Natalie. You have to unlock it. If we force it open, we lose the prototype. That's $10 million of hardware. I looked at him. I looked at Holloway. I looked at the ruin of the party. I can't, doctor, I said. Why not? You have the badge. You have the fingerprint. I'm not an employee, I said, repeating the line that had become my shield. And honestly, that prototype should be destroyed. The servos are overclocked. It's a ticking time bomb. But the company. Dr. Aris stammered. If we lose the prototype, there's nothing left. There was nothing left the moment Richard signed my name to a fake contract, I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. The notification was still there. Authorization denied, I powered the phone off. Let it break, I said. I turned and walked toward the exit. The reporters shouted my name. Natalie. Natalie. What are you going to do now? Are you going to sue? Are you going to take over the company? I pushed through the glass doors into the rain. The air was cold and clean. It smelled of wet pavement and exhaust, but to me, it smelled like freedom. I walked to the corner where I had parked my car. My old, beat-up Honda Civic. As I fumbled for my keys, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. It was Agent Miller. Ms. Vance, he said. Am I being arrested, Agent? I asked, weary. No, he said. He looked at me with a strange expression. Respect. I just wanted to say, nice documentation. Most people don't keep receipts like that. I had a good teacher, I said, touching the digital locket where I kept Nana Rose's photo. We're going to need you to come in for a formal statement tomorrow, Miller said. And you'll likely be the key witness at the grand jury. I'll be there. One more thing, Miller added. Your mother. She's in the lobby. She's not being charged tonight. Do you want a ride? Or do you want to talk to her? I looked back at the glowing glass facade of the building. I could see Barbara sitting on a bench in the lobby, alone, her head in her hands. The old Natalie, the good daughter, would have gone back. She would have comforted her. She would have driven her home, and made her tea. But the good daughter had been fired. No, I said. She has her own car. And she made her choice. Understood, Miller nodded. Get some sleep, Ms. Vance. He drove away. I got into my car. It started with a rattle. I didn't care. It was mine. I drove onto the highway, the city lights fading in my rearview mirror. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the sound of the tires on the road. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. The next 3 weeks were a blur of lawyers, depositions, and headlines. Tech dynasty implodes, CEO arrested for fraud. The $1.2 billion gamble, how one sister exposed it all. I didn't give interviews. I didn't go on talk shows. I sat in a small room at the federal prosecutor's office and walked them through the black ledger, page by page. The fallout was catastrophic for my family. Because Holloway pulled his funding and sued for fraud, the bank called in the loans on the company. Ares MedTech declared Chapter 7 bankruptcy within 10 days. The assets were frozen, then seized. But it didn't stop at the company. Because Richard had mingled company funds with personal accounts, using the R&D budget to pay for the mortgage on the mansion and the lease on his Bentley, the feds pierced the corporate veil. RICO statutes are a terrifying thing. They allow the government to seize anything purchased with the proceeds of a crime. They took the house in the Hamptons. They took the penthouse in Seattle. They took the cars. They even took Kyle's collection of vintage watches. I was exempt. My meager savings, my Honda, my rented apartment, they were clean. I was the only Vance left standing. One rainy Tuesday, about a month after the arrest, I was in my apartment packing boxes. I was moving to a smaller place, just to be safe with my savings until I figured out my next move. There was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole. It was Barbara. She looked older. 10 years older in 30 days. Her hair wasn't dyed. She was wearing a raincoat from Target, not Burberry. She was soaking wet. I opened the door but I left the chain on. Natalie, she said. Her voice was thin, trembling. Can I come in? It's pouring. What do you want, Barbara? I asked. I couldn't call her mom. Not anymore. I need help, she said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. The bank, they locked the accounts. Even the joint account. I can't buy groceries. Your father's bail hearing is tomorrow, and we don't have the money for a bondsman. That sounds like a problem, I said. Natalie, please. She grabbed the doorframe. He's your father. He's sitting in a cell with murderers. He's an old man. He could die in there. He should have thought about that before he bribed a senator, I said. Or before he tried to frame his daughter for extortion. He was desperate. We were all desperate. She was crying now, ugly, desperate tears. We did it for the family. We wanted to leave a legacy for you and Kyle. For me? I laughed. You left nothing for me. You gave the equity to Kyle. You gave the patent to Kyle. You gave the love to Kyle. I was just the mechanic. I'm sorry, she wailed. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. You were the smart one. You were always the smart one. Please, Natalie. Just, do you have any money? Just a few thousand. Just to get us through the week. I looked at her. This woman who had lived in mansions while I struggled to pay student loans. This woman who had turned a blind eye to my abuse for a decade. I felt a pang of pity. It was a reflex. But then I remembered the signature. I remembered the text message, "Don't contact Dad right now, he's very busy with important people." I don't have money for you, I said. You must. You have savings. You never spent anything. My savings are for my future, I said. Not for Richard's bail. You ungrateful brat. The mask slipped again. The rage returned. After everything we gave you. We put a roof over your head. I paid rent. I snapped. I worked since I was 16. I built your company. I earned every cent I have, and you stole the rest. I started to close the door. If you close this door, she screamed, you are dead to us. You hear me? You have no family. I stopped. I looked her in the eye through the crack of the door. Barbara, I said quietly. I haven't had a family since I was 12 years old. I just finally stopped pretending. I slammed the door. I threw the deadbolt. I heard her pounding on the wood for a minute, screaming insults. Then, silence. Then, the sound of footsteps walking away. I slid down to the floor. I thought I would cry. I waited for the tears. But they didn't come. Instead, I felt a lightness in my chest. The anchor was gone. The ship had sunk, but I was in the lifeboat. And for the first time, I was rowing my own way. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I picked it up. Ms. Vance. A familiar voice. This is Arthur Halloway. Mr. Halloway, I said, wiping my face. If this is about the deposition. It's not, he said. I'm looking at the remnants of the Ares Code. The seized servers. The FBI gave me read-only access to assess the value for the bankruptcy auction. It's worthless, I said. Without the supervisor key, it's just junk code. The code isn't junk, Natalie. The architecture is brilliant. The execution was flawed because of the hardware limitations your father imposed. He paused. I'm starting a new venture, Halloway said. Clean slate. No legacy debt. No Van Cess. Just pure engineering. I have the capital. I have the facility. But I don't have the architect. My heart skipped a beat. What are you asking, Mr. Halloway? I'm not asking you to work for me, Natalie, he said. I'm asking if you want to be my partner. 50-50 equity. You run the tech. I write the checks. We build it right this time. No shortcuts. No lies. I stood up. I looked around my empty apartment. 50-50. I asked. Mechanics get paid, Halloway said, his voice warm. Founders get equity. I smiled. A real smile. I have a few conditions, I said. Name them. We call it Phoenix Tech, I said. And we hire Sarah as the operations manager. Double her salary. Done, Halloway said. Meet me at the lawyer's office tomorrow. Bring your black notebook. The sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the new office in Bellevue. It was a smaller space than the Ares Tower, but it was brighter. Open concept. No corner offices. No secrets. I sat at my desk, which was just a table in the middle of the engineering pit, watching the lines of code scroll down my monitor. System check, green. Latency, 0.02 milliseconds. FDA compliance, verified. It's beautiful, Sarah said, leaning over my shoulder. She was wearing a blazer and looked like the boss she was born to be. It's safe, I corrected her. That's what matters. Phoenix Tech had launched quietly. No gala. No champagne. No press release. We just invited 3 surgeons to test the new Aegis arm in a private lab. The feedback was unanimous. It was the best surgical tool they had ever used. We had our first contract with Seattle Grace Hospital signed this morning. $50 million. Real money. Clean money. My phone buzzed. I looked at the news feed. Richard Vance sentenced to 12 years for corporate fraud. Kyle Vance accepts plea deal, 5 years in minimum security. I clicked the article. There was a photo of Richard being led out of the courthouse. He looked frail. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked at the camera with a mix of confusion and anger. He still didn't understand. He probably never would. The article mentioned that Barbara had moved into a small condo in Idaho with her sister. She was living on Social Security. I put the phone down. I didn't feel happy about it. I didn't feel sad. I just felt resolved. It was a chapter closed. A book burned. Mr. Holloway walked in, holding 2 coffees. He placed one on my desk. Black, 2 sugars, he said. Just like Nana Rose liked it. I looked at him, surprised. How did you know? I knew your grandmother, Natalie, Holloway smiled. She was the one who introduced me to your father 30 years ago. She told me, Richard is a shark, but watch his granddaughter. She's the dolphin. She's the one who will navigate the storm. I felt a lump in my throat. She knew. She knew everything. Why do you think she gave you the ledger? I touched the notebook, which now sat on a special shelf on my desk. We have a meeting with the ethics board in 10 minutes, Holloway said. Ready to show them the new safety protocols. I was born ready, I said. I stood up. I smoothed out my jeans. I wasn't wearing a pantsuit. I wasn't wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit. I was wearing whatever I wanted. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. For 10 years, I thought my value was in how much I could fix for other people. I thought if I worked hard enough, suffered enough, and bled enough, they would finally see me. But you can't make people see you if they're only looking for a reflection of themselves. I realized now that the injustice wasn't just that they stole my work. It was that they stole my belief in myself. They made me think I was the pedestal. But pedestals don't move. Pedestals don't think. And pedestals certainly don't own 50% of the fastest-growing medtech company in the Pacific Northwest. I turned back to the room full of engineers, young, hungry, brilliant kids who were looking at me for guidance. Not for orders but for leadership. All right, team, I said, clapping my hands. Let's build something that actually helps people. The sound of keyboards clacking filled the room. It was the best music I had ever heard. I am Natalie Vance. I am not a ghost. I am not a mechanic. I am the architect. And this time, I'm keeping the keys. Thank you for listening to my story. I am truly grateful for every single one of you who stuck around to see justice served. If you made it to the very end, comment the letter A below so I know you're one of the true ones, the people who believe in resilience and truth. Write A and tell me, what is the one thing you are building for your future today? Also, check out the other videos on the channel for more stories of justice. Until next time, keep your receipts.